here we are with a better setup this time. I'm not sitting on the floor, I'm sitting in a comfortable chair at a sturdy desk ready to talk about these films. I'm going to tell you why films fail. I'm going to tell you why films succeed. This is episode number 152 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, being recorded on Thursday, February 27th, 2025 at 5:25 p.m. I got the window right behind me, so it's a little chilly where I'm sitting, but it's also kind of cool and kind of cozy because it's the weather to stay in. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to stay in. We're going to get the job done. We're going to get the work done. We're gonna make our dreams come true and not sit around talking about them. We're gonna make them a reality. And it's gonna be great, man. It's gonna be real cool. All right, man. All these films to talk about. There's never enough time to talk about them all, but we do what we can. We try to, at least. In life, 'cause you're never gonna see every film you want. You're never gonna read every book you want or do everything you want to. But you try to lead and live a healthy, focused life to not be brought down by the peer pressures of the world, of fake responsibilities. And I say fake responsibilities as in people want you to do something that you don't want to do, outside of, if you got to go to a job, man, we all got to go to work. But at the end of the workday, you come home. What do you want to do? If you want to work on your painting, if you want to perfect learning an instrument, then you got to stay focused and you got to stay true to yourself on that. So if Dr. Dummy's texting you and he's saying, "Oh my gosh, just go down, go to the bar, just have 10 beers, let's punch each other in the head." You gotta say, "No way, man. We're not drinking 10 beers. It's not punching each other in the head. I'm gonna be working on making my dreams come true." And most rational people will go, "Okay, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna do this myself because this is what I want to do." And then you'll have others who just can't even comprehend that you don't want to go down to the bar and drink 10 beers and punch yourself in the head. It's an anomaly for sure. But you stay focused, stay true to ourselves, to our art, to our goals, our ambitions, and we're going to find ourselves leading a fulfilling and joyful life, because that's what life is. It is joyful, and we need to make it fulfilling. It will not be fulfilled for us. We're going to experience the highs and the lows to ultimately get to the end and make the whole thing fulfilled, man. Make the whole thing worthwhile. So, in my quest, that's not the right word, in my watching logs, that sounds even worse. In my watching logs. Now, what would make me say that? In my watching of these mumblecore-esque 2000s, and even some 2010s comedy dramas, I was compelled to rewatch a film I had talked about before, a film that I've been very fond of. I've talked about this film a couple of times now, and this was the first time rewatching it since my initial viewing, and how profound of a viewing that ended up becoming. And I'm talking about the film Something Anything, written and directed by Paul Harrell, from 2014, starring Ashley Shelton. It's a film that I talked about for the first time maybe last January. I'm sorry, no, maybe January 2023. I don't remember. But it's been a few years since I had watched it and since I had talked about it, and I had been compelled to revisit it because it had been running through my head, and I questioned whether or not how strongly I would feel on another viewing of it. It's a film that really sat with me, really is one that is tricky to recommend, because if you're on board with it, then you're really gonna be on board with it. If you're not, you might see it as very shallow, perhaps even simple, and I don't think that's you're not wrong for feeling that way. In terms of your reaction to the film, ultimately how you feel about the film will depend on your own experiences, will depend on your own life and what you get out of these kinds of films. But On this second viewing, I was a couple of things had been highlighted for me. The first of which being, of course, again, just the exceptional performance by Ashley Shelton. The second of which being that after watching Paul Harrell's most recent film at the time of this recording, what I believe is his most recent film, which was Light from 2019, and I am correct, that is currently his most recent directorial film, because he has done now two features, and his short films will have to be seen in due time. But reading an interview with him and reading about the religious, spiritual aspect to his films, and more specifically with Light from Light, that's a film that feels very, very spiritual in a way of comfort, of this idea of taking the plot of taking. Let me get a sip of this. And I spilled it on myself. That's just great. But of taking this concept of comfort after death, of there being something more than this mortal coil, in a very comforting and not entirely in a sad way, but the acceptance of death and the acceptance of being without a loved one, someone we hold or held very dear to us, and being okay with that. It's not a film that beats you over the point with it, but it is a film where that is the central sort of idea, and that coziness of that idea of perhaps there being something more than what we experience just in this life is very, very cool, man. But with Something Anything, it has an aspect of that to a certain degree of the religious sort of aspect of this character, Peggy, who has been through a tragedy and has rejected her higher end lifestyle with her well paying job, her handsome, rich boyfriend, soon to be, I should say, rich, handsome fiance, the people around her who do not respect her or hold her opinions to any sort of serious matter, and her leaning towards a far more simplistic, a far more, I don't want to say simplistic in a bad way, that's probably not the correct word to use, a far more pulled back lifestyle than she is interested in a colleague that she used to be familiar with. And I gotta find that actor right here because it's one or the other. And I think it's this fella. Nope, it's not him. It's the other fella. I'm gonna pull that name up right here. So we're gonna give him proper credit. That's going to be maybe, I don't even know if that's him or not. Hold on a minute. Bear with me for a second. Well, don't you worry, because I found the actor. The actor's name, who I meant to refer to, is Linz Edwards, who used to know, or I should say Peggy used to know him, and he basically went off to become a monk, and then he eventually, well, I won't go through all of it, but they have an interaction later on. She basically wants to be a part of his life again, and adopting not quite the monk lifestyle that that he had gone away to this monastery and had gone and done his own thing, but sort of have that very zen like kind of lifestyle, that sort of embracing the beauty of life, and something as simple as, I mean, some of the like something like just being aware of where you are in the moment, even early on. I shouldn't say, I'm sorry, not early on, but even there's a point, something as simple as her waking up and coming out onto the porch and seeing Tim, the character Tim, played by Linz Edwards, just casually reading a book, and their conversation about said book is far more valuable and is far more nuanced than anything in her previous life, and that separating yourself from it is as simple and as difficult as one can be, because if you're cutting yourself off from certain people, um, these characters aren't even interested in what kind of emotional turmoil you've been through or are even still going through. It's more about the societal sort of expectations of what people want from you. You know, you're supposed to have this, you're supposed to have the big house and the well paying job and the two dogs, the two kids, but it's sort of like, what are you getting out of it? Are you, and then they make a point of that in the film as well. She is talking to one of the friends and basically kind of breaks that down of just not being selfish, but of just at what point are you living not for somebody else, but for you. Living for somebody else is part of the experience, is part of, the things to do. But if you're only waiting for this and then for that, and then now your life is behind you, what do you got left? You basically threw it all behind you because you're expecting this, or you're expecting that, and people want you to do this and that. It's an incredibly touching film. It's a very quiet film. It's a film that really takes its time. Certain shots will stay on with characters just going in and out of the frame. It's all incredibly well done, and the ending as well. The first time it almost kind of took my breath away, and this time it's so impactful as well. I had to compare it to something like City Lights in that it's a film. Both these films are not overtly romantic films. They're not a film. They're not films entirely about romance. That's just an aspect to it, and that's a plot point that motivates the main character. And because of that, when you get these endings, these final scenes, where it almost makes you emotional watching. Not emotional in the way where you're crying, but it almost makes you emotional in the way where you're almost so overwhelmed by the romanticism. The final scene in this is just a simple exchange, but the dialogue there and the fact that it built up to this point, it feels so earned, and it feels like, my gosh, this is just unbelievably touching. Much in the same way of City Lights, where, I mean, that's a silent film as well, so you don't have the benefit of the characters being able to enunciate or proclaim their emotions. But just in, if you've seen that film, without giving it away, you just have the reaction of the main character in that, who has been through this ordeal, and sort of the payoff of it all is so unbelievably romantic and is so far more sincere than writing that would tell the audience, I am in love with this person, I love this about them. And that can work to a certain extent, but for the context, I should say, of these films, it works so perfectly. And I think the ending of this is just so perfect. It's a film that, on this viewing, those feelings that I had when I first watched it are really, they are still there. I feel so strongly about this film, and it's one that it can't be pushed on anybody. Many films can't, but not in the same way where you can say, well, this is a great classic film. This is a film that has historical significance. I think this is one that, reading some of the reactions online, I think the people who really feel for this film are very passionate about it. And Paul Harrell is such a strong writer director. It feels very meticulous, and it feels very much like, it's taking its time with the characters, with the situations. It has long stretches that are dour, but then it also has very hopeful and very earned sections where you're following this character and all that she's been through, and the outcomes of just certain events in the film feel so honest and real and sincere. And I mean, this really has just become one of my favorite films. And it's one that, if you click with it, great. But if not, then that's okay too. It's all about what you get out of it yourself. And I got quite a lot out of this. So it was great to revisit this and give it another glance. Because there is, I think, sometimes that kind of pressure, or perhaps not pressure, but there is sometimes that idea of a film that you may have seen at one point that you come back to all this time later, and you're like, my gosh, it's not as good as perhaps you thought it once was. And that doesn't negate your feelings in the film. You can have a really good experience watching a film, and then you go back to it and you don't have that. But I think that first time you had that experience is so valid, and is so a much bigger sort of, what's what I'm looking for on this. that experience that you have the first time is adds to your overall opinion of the film. So if you watch it a second time and you're not as hot on it, then there was something in that first time that made you think that way. So there is still some inherent value to that, which is so touching. Which is it's just not a good film or a bad film. Much in the same way, there are films that you watch the first time. There have been many films I've seen the first time and I didn't like, but then they really just kind of sat with me and they really kind of festered and picked away. And I went, all right, there's something here. I'm being compelled to revisit this, and then I revisit it, and then it all kind of like goes into place. All the blocks fit into the pegs and all the holes on the on the game, and you're like, oh, all the pieces were there, they just needed to be assembled. So I love this film. Paul Harrell is one of my favorite contemporary filmmakers. It's great last week talking about these other great contemporary filmmakers, Bob Byington, Andrew Bujalski, Aaron Katz, and I think these are not the filmmakers, I guess, who are getting, I guess, who are not the big, 2000 2000 cinema released films, and then that's fine. That's fine to the ones who are. That's great. They can get exposure that way. But I feel like when it comes to the really strong contemporary filmmakers of now, I think there's a lot of directors like these who are maybe not in the general conversation, and I think are films worth looking at, as well as been interested in the work of Alex Ross Perry. I have only seen two of his films now, but he's been a filmmaker who has been on my radar for a little while. I'm sorry, I've seen three of his films, and all three I think are interesting to their own extent. He's done a lot of music videos, and he's done a couple of comedies, couple of dramas. His directorial debut was a film called Impolex from 2009. Then he did The Color Wheel in 2011, which will be watched hopefully soon. That's been on the radar to watch. In 2014, I'm going off features, by the way. He did Listen Up Phillip, which I have seen. In 2015, he directed Queen of Earth, which I have seen. In 2017, he directed Golden Exits, which I've seen. Then in 2018, he directed Her Smell. Did some other works here. A lot of music videos. I don't know what this one is. Pavements. I don't know if this is a film or what this is. A documentary about the indie band Pavement. Interesting. Okay. Very cool. But he as well is a very, very good filmmaker. Listen Up Phillip and Golden Exits, I think, are both very good. I really liked Listen Up Phillip. Jason Schwartzman in that film. He plays a writer who is reluctant to get himself close to anybody. He's very narcissistic. He's very difficult to be around. Elizabeth Moss breaks up with him early on. She can't be in a relationship with him anymore. Elizabeth Moss would work again with Alex Ross Perry in Queen of Earth and Her Smell. As well in the film, we have Jonathan Pryce in a small role, Kristen Ritter in the film, Jess Wexler and Keith Poulsen, who were both in Somebody Up There Likes Me, which is kind of what I'm talking about, adjacent to a lot of those sort of mumblecore films. A lot of the same actors. You have Caitlin Scheel in a small role in the film, who would be in a lot of, I guess, I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess not really a lot of, I guess Joe Swanberg stuff. Yeah, I kind of associate her with a lot of the filmmakers, the Joe Swanbergs and Ty West, Adam Barrett, or I'm sorry, Simon Barrett, Adam Wingard. She was in a lot of all of their films, and she has a small part in this. It's a very good film. It's a solid comedy drama dealing with a real pain in the ass of a person, but I can't say that name. Jason Schwartzman's charisma and likability is a big factor into why this is so enjoyable to watch. And even a film of Alex Ross Perry's that I wasn't crazy about, which is Queen of Earth, I think has a lot of really solid aspects in it. Elizabeth Moss and Catherine Waterston in that film are at a lake house together, and there are some manipulations with time. The beginning of the film is Elizabeth Moss's character Catherine being broken up with by her boyfriend, or I don't remember if she was the one who broke up with him. They have a big fight early on, and so we jump back and forth between different periods in time at this lake house. At times, it was a little almost incoherent in terms of when exactly some of the things were supposed to take place. Um, but it was enjoyable enough. It's not one that I'm particularly very strongly positive or negative on. There's a lot that's really solid in it. I think the film is strongest when you have the character, the more down to earth character interactions between Catherine, Virginia, played by Catherine Waterston, and actually, funnily enough, in this film as well, we also have Keith Poulsen and Caitlin Scheel. Um, but some of their digs at each other felt very natural. There is an underlying level of aggression throughout the film where you have these characters being very cruel to one another, being very cruel to other people, and just the things they're saying very snide, very quick, kind of like jabs at their insecurities or of their past. Catherine's father was an accomplished, I don't remember if he was an accomplished painter or an architect, or I don't remember what it was, but in New York. So she works for him, and some of the characters resent that. They resent her for that she has had basically this kind of easier, to them, easier lifestyle of being tied to a famous artist. And there's a really well done scene. They're really kind of grilling her about the fact that she's working for him, and so even a film like this that I didn't, it didn't totally work for me. I had some acquaintances where actually I was looking at their reactions on Letterboxd. They were very down on the film, but there is a lot that's really good in the film. I think if this was, I mean, it's going for hallucinogenic sort of not always quite in reality sort of vibe, and that's fine. That can work, but I think the parts that were more straight, that were more played straight, I found far more fascinating and far more engaging than some of the more surreal aspects of the film. But it is an interesting film nonetheless, and I think should be mentioned in the conversation if you're going through the films of this time. And then I mentioned, I don't know if I ever talked about Golden Exits on the show. I watched it for the 2018 episode because it was listed as 2018. And I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember liking it quite a bit. So that may need to be revisited in due time. And I'd like to also see his, like I said, the Color Wheel, Impolex, and Her Smell, which I know has I've heard a lot of people say they like that film, or at least I've seen that brought up in the conversation a lot. And it looks like he's done, like I said, a lot of music videos for some rock bands and stuff. He did a concert movie for the band Ghost in 2024. So, hopefully we can get another kind of just straight narrative film out of him, and we shall see. So solid filmmakers all around, man. We got, people talking about, there's no, I don't know, people I think have this sort of idea of just success overnight, or these filmmakers who like, oh man, they're so young, they did all this. But it's sort of like, man, they're just going out there, just doing it. They're making these films, and they're putting themselves out there. So if you want to do that, man, if you want to make a film, you want to write a screenplay, you want to write a novel, man, whatever it is, you just got to go ahead and do it, because you can't sit around talking about it for the rest of your life. Because if you're waiting for a golden opportunity to fall into your lap, it's probably not going to happen. And if it does happen, you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons of that. What kind of experience are you going to be gaining? What are you not going to be earning from that? It's ultimately in the eye of in the beholder on that regard. But yeah, hey man, with that said, this Sunday, the Academy Awards, that'll be fun. See who wins, see who loses. It'll be great to talk with acquaintances on films, on films that, hey, have you seen this one, or you should check out this one, or I heard this one was pretty good. It's all in good fun. I don't take it terribly seriously at all, but they are fun to kind of look at, discuss with acquaintances, have good conversation, good artistic conversation about these films, about films in the conversation, about previous year's winners, losers, films that stand the test of time, films that don't, and they don't need to stand the test of time. If they work for that moment, then that I think that's what matters more so than worrying about how it'll play in 100 years or so from now. I mean, there are films that win Best Picture, or there are films that get heavily nominated and talked about in that current year, and then it's almost like the day after, it feels almost like it's been dropped. And there are those films that do persist and sustain throughout time. And then there's others that are good for that moment in time where you can go, okay, and in this year, this was the film of the moment, and this was the one that people were really standing behind and really saying that yes, this is what will represent the year. And then others, you'll go, oh, this film, perhaps there's an upset, perhaps should have won. There are many years in which that are famous now for films of the moment being given the awards over the films that have ultimately stood the test of time and are more in the general conversation. And that's okay. They're fun to watch, they're fun to discuss, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it. It's really not anything that's gonna tamper with my day or with my life. But speaking of which, I'm gonna wrap this one up. So I also wanted to give a brief shout out to a commenter who left me a very, very nice comment. Let me get the name up right here. It was Zammy Adams 4343. Left a kind comment on the last episode. I hope you enjoy the puffy chair should you watch it. I hope it gives you the same experience that it gave to me. But that'll wrap it up for here. So much to be done. So much to do, man, I tell you. Never ends, but good. That's great, man. Don't want it to end. We got to live life to the fullest, and by God, we're going to do that. So thank you so much for listening. Be back for another episode soon. Take care. God bless. And until next time.